Anyway, I think it's time to get started. We've got a lot of people on the call already. So yeah, welcome everyone to another Mendix community webinar, this time about designing your native mobile apps like a pro. And we'll be doing that with our resident pro, Chris Hodges, is the design lead here at Mendix. Now, I'm Jan de Vries, Community Engagement Manager here at Mendix, and it's my job to make developers successful. So hopefully with this session, we can give you a closer look at native mobile app design to show you the best practices and actually how to do it in real life. And yeah, my good friend and colleague here, Chris Hodges, will take us through the steps to and show you how to do that. So we're not just going to talk about it, but actually take an app and yeah, go ahead and design it. So thanks for joining the session, Chris. Now, before we start, the webinar is being recorded and we will be publishing it afterwards. So if you happen to miss a part or you want to rewatch something, no problem. We'll be publishing it within a couple of days probably. And yeah, you can share that with your colleagues as well who couldn't attend. Another thing is that you can join us through the chat. So we've already got people chatting. And if you have questions for us during the webinar, you can use the Q&A window. So after the presentation and after the demos, we'll take a look at the questions and try to answer them as best as possible. And yeah, make sure that you have everything you need for designing native mobile apps. Now, one of the parts that I really like about these webinars is that you can join us in the build, or you can take a look at the project files right now while we're listening and watching Chris doing some awesome design magic, and you can take a look at it later. So everything that we're showing in the webinar today is in those files. So make sure you take a look at those, download them, and yeah, see what you can do with them. All right, now to set the case. If you've joined us last month, we built a fitness tracking app on native mobile together with our colleague Ryan Maki. And you know, it was just meant to be a small app for a couple of friends. But it turns out some colleagues from Siemens saw this app and they said, you know what, maybe we can deploy this in a bigger scale for, you know, maybe teams or more people. But to do that, we need to make sure it looks like a Siemens app. So we want to brand it like a Siemens app. And that's where really Chris comes in. So I'm really happy that Chris is here. Chris, what do you need to style this app like a Mendix app or a Siemens app?
So what Jan was explaining was that our colleagues at Siemens want to use our fitness tracking app to be able to, let's say, use it within their own organization. So everyone can see this screen, right, with my mobile display on the left-hand side and the editor in the middle. So Jan wants to sort of customize this app and make it Siemens branded, for instance. So if anyone's familiar with sort of web design in general in Mendix, you'll be familiar with the structure we have with our styles. So we structured the styles, and for every project, we structure it into two sort of folders. So we have native, and that contains all our native styles. And we also have web, which contains all our web styles. And so for each project, we have a similar structure for both web and native, as you can see. We have an app, our core, and a UI resource package. So app is predominantly used for our custom styling that we're going to make, whereas core is useful from Atlas, and it's useful, that's where all the Atlas files are being stored for our app. So if I go to app, and inside app, you'll see two files, so custom variables JavaScript and custom JavaScript. And these are the predominant two files we're going to be working with today. And so for instance, if we go to our custom variables file, this is our variables file, which contains all our brand colors, as well as it contains information on our font sizes, padding, and even some more general aspects around navigation and tab containers. So to apply the brand colors that's been suggested by Jan, for instance, I'm just going to copy and paste at the moment this file down, but you can sort of manually edit the colors and the color variables as much as you want. You can use hexadecimal, which I'm using here, but you can also use RGB values as well. So if I save this now quickly, and another feature we're going to use in this today is we're going to use the hot reload, and this just helps out with our fast iterations and development when we're doing native mobile development. So what we've done now is, and you can see that we've applied the Siemens brand colors throughout our app. But what we can also do is we don't just also alter and update variables. We can create our own as well. So as you can see at the top of the screen, the status bar is white, and we can't see, for instance, the 3G network and also the power, the little battery sign, all that stuff, and that's hardly visible on our screen right now. And if we look down our navigation section down the bottom here, you'll see that it's set to light content at the moment. So it's set to this white style. So what we're going to do is we're going to introduce a new variable, a new design variable, so we can change this color and sort of affect it now and then. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll up to the top here, take these constants on. So I've already created a bar style new constant, and you can do this throughout your app. And you can use this variable then through not just this page, but also on the custom JavaScript page as well. So I'm just going to use this variable, copy this across. And if I go back down to our navigation down here, I can update the color. Gone a bit too far. And I'm going to paste this in and click save, and then do another hot reload. And it will build my package up, and you'll see that the bar at the top has changed color as well. So this is the only place what we can do. So also we can copy any variables that we have in the core folder. We can copy also these variables across and put them into our custom variables, and also amend and update them and overwrite them. So everything that you put in the custom variables will overwrite the variables that are in your Atlas variable folder as well. So now that we've set up our variables, the beauty of this is that if we go back to Studio Pro now, we can make design changes without having to impact that file or do any more custom native styling. So for instance, this button that you see on the page, I don't think Jan likes that it's orange. What I can do is I can change it to be blue, for instance. So I can use design properties within Mendix to change this to our secondary color, which is blue. We can also manipulate here as well, because we set up padding rules as well and margin rules. We can also add a bit more margin to the bottom of this as well. So we can add large to this, and we can again run our app. And instead of using the hot reload this time, we're just going to run it because we've made modular changes. And we're just going to run it now and test. I think important part of all native development is to do this sort of stage where you do the iteration and then you test it to see how it goes, see how it looks. So we're just testing at the moment, just waiting for it to build. And as you can see, the button is blue, and we've added a little bit more padding. So Jan, is this more to your liking?
Definitely, yeah. I think it already looks much more like a Siemens app with just a couple of small changes. Before we continue, I'm curious about our viewers today, and I'm wondering what your Mendix design experience is. So I'm just going to launch a quick poll here that you can vote on. Now, while you're voting, we do have some questions coming in. So first of all, question is, how do you get the window on the right? So how do you get your phone to clone on the left side?
So I'm using my Mac at the moment, and I'm using QuickTime. And if I plug my cable into my phone, I can run it through a QuickTime movie recording. So I can run and record anything that I'm doing on my mobile phone. I just had a little bit of a problem at the beginning where it overheated because it was being plugged in. So I don't know if anyone's seen this new Apple feature, but it locks your whole phone when it's overheated.
Right. Awesome. And you mentioned hot reload. What is hot reload exactly?
So hot reload is, instead of having to run locally all the time, you can make design changes in your styling and in your theme package without having to go back to Studio every time and rerun locally your project. So you can very much make changes quite rapidly and very much without having to go back and forth between Studio Pro. So for us as designers, that's brilliant because we don't want to constantly, for every small change, having to keep going back into Studio Pro. The hot reload allows us to work in that fast iterations as well as that test and learn sort of cycle.
Awesome. All right, I'm just going to end the poll and see what the results are. So I'll share this with everyone as well. So you can now see, what is your development experience or design experience? So most people have experience with web and hybrid design. Just so you know, it was multiple choice. So you could choose multiple answers here. We do have some people who are already doing native mobile design, so that's very interesting. And a small percentage has other type of experience. That's great. Thanks, guys, for sharing that. Now on to the next part. Now, it's already looking like a good Siemens app, but what if we can add some more rounded corners? For example, the button in the bottom right there. And for iOS users, for example, we only have a bottom bar for input text fields. Is that something you can do?
Yeah, sure thing, Jan. We can do all that for you. But before I get into that, I just want to introduce you, because we're going to just do some custom native styling now. I just want to round off some background with the audience first on how we can do native styling and some of the sort of the differences, because we've got a couple of, let's just say, web and hybrid designers in the call. So I'm just going to share with you some of the differences between that and native development, native styling. So I'm just going to go back to PowerPoint and our presentation quickly. So a lot of you would be very familiar with this syntax on the left-hand side. So this is Sass CSS, and we use this very much for our web development at the moment. You'll see with the box on the right-hand side, a simple implementation where we've set a height to 50 pixels. We've also set a width to 50 pixels as well to get this square shape. And then we've got a background color applied to it as well. So if we switch over to our native sort of representation of this, you notice it looks pretty similar to CSS, right? But in general, the rules, for the height, width, and background color generally do the same things, and they match how CSS works on the web. But there is a few minor exceptions here and there. So one of the ones that you might notice is that for background color, that style attribute, there's no hyphen. There's a capital C instead of a lowercase c. So every styles that we write in React Native, we write them in camel case without any intervening spaces or punctuation. And the second thing you might notice is also that for the height and width objects elements, we don't have any units. So everything in React Native is unitless. So everything works off density independent pixels. So iOS uses points, whereas Android uses DPI. And this is just very similar. And then lastly, everything that you see in React Native is written in JavaScript rather than CSS syntax. There's another major difference as well. So every React Native widget and component that we use in Mendix is created with many built-in components, and they're all reused from the core React library. So a couple of the components that we use are views, text, and images. And these are all used to create our React Native widgets as well. And you'll see in an example later on how they help structure out, for instance, a button or for instance, a card layout as well. So each of these components has its own specific set of styles, and these styles may not or may be applicable to each other. So for instance, if we take the text component, it has styles of color, font size, font style, so forth. And then if we take the example of an image, it has different styles, and it doesn't support the ones that the text option has, and so forth. The image one won't support what the text one has. So using this sort of component-based architecture, we sort of build up our native widgets in Mendix. And for more information on this and for more knowledge as well, you can go to the React Native docs. We do have a slide at the end of the presentation where we do replay all these links out to people as well. But this web page will tell you all the React Native core styles and properties that you can apply to the elements in Mendix, as well as all the custom native widgets that we build in Mendix. We also have our own docs, which will link you out to, will tell you what styles you can and cannot use in different elements of our widgets, as well as we do show you which ones have been applied from the React Native guide as well.
Excellent. Let's see if we can we can do some of the changes in the app.
Yeah. So let me just go across to my desktop, and I'll go back to my IDE. So the IDE I'm using for this is Visual Code Studio, if anyone wants to know.
You're using a nice little plugin, right, for the colors of the hex?
Yeah, everyone was liking that one. This one at the top here, just an extension added on. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this to implement Jan's sort of rounded corners in this button. We're going to create a custom class. So I'm going to give it a name, so button rounded. So I've already given it a name there. One thing you will notice is that this class has got a lowercase b, and that's because any custom styling that we want to make, and it's a general rule of thumb in Mendix, we want to keep them in that camel case approach, whereas anything from our core, such as the action button down here, we keep with a capital A at the beginning. So we just keep that sort of style so people can easily distinguish between what is core and what is custom. So as you can see, the structure for this custom class, you can see how it's broken down and componentized. So we've got a container, an icon, and a caption. So the container inherits styles from the view, so our React Native view object, whereas the icon inherits from the text, and so does the caption as well. So the styles will differ what we can use in which section of this component. So for instance, if we just want to apply our border radius to be a border radius for this button, we're just going to apply it to the container. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a class border radius, this action here, and because it's uniless, I'm just going to put the number 6 there, and that will apply a border radius of 6 to our button. I'm just going to save that now. And just to make note, if you want to so this is just applying it to any button that I add this class to. If I wanted to apply this globally to every button of our app, I could use the default class, which you can find out as well from the Mendix docs. You can find out what default classes are applied to which components. So I can apply here, I could put border radius here, and then every button throughout this app could have a border radius. We can also add custom styling to pluggable widgets, so widgets that we get from the App Store. So for instance, the floating button, we can create a custom styling up for that. And if we want to start customizing pluggable widgets, a little fact is that the widget name, we just replace the dots with underscores, and you can use that as that default styling for that pluggable widget. So what we're going to do now is we're going to apply this class to our button on our page. So if I save this and I go back to Mendix, so I'm going to go to our new edit page now, and I'm going to go to our start button, and I'm just going to go and paste in our common down here in our class where we add custom classes. I'm just going to add button rounded, and I'm now just going to run this. And you'll see once we've reloaded it, that button will have rounded corners applied to it. Yeah, there we go. We've lost it, but if I go
So
back.
Chris, a question, the hot reload, is
Yeah.
that something you manually trigger or does it go automatically? How does it go?
So what you can't see from my hand is when I save my Visual Studio document. So any files in my Visual Studio folder, Mendix will look at the project and it will see if there's any changes there and do a hot reload.
Perfect.
Yeah. So we've
Already
added
looking
rounded
better.
corners.
Yep.
We've added rounded corners to our button there. So is that much more to your liking, Jan?
Sure is.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at that text box.
Yeah, I will do. So because React Native uses JavaScript to do native styling, we can use a lot of expressions and functions when we're writing styles. So for one of them is we can create conditional statements for what platform users are using. So this is the sort of the custom class for a custom text box, and you'll see its structure. It's got a container, a label, an input box, and it's also got constructors for when it's disabled and input errors and validation messages. So what we want to look at now is when we look at the input box here. So it's already got a border set on it of 2 pixels around the top, the left, the right, and the bottom, and with a radius of a 6. So what you'll see below it is this statement, which allows us to make this conditional statement for both iOS and Android. And you can see our 2 options below here. So we've got iOS styles, Android styles as well. So if I just take off the comments here. Another expression that you can do, as well as the platform select, which is becoming more and more popular, is dark mode and light mode on your mobile phone. So at the moment, my iPhone was in dark mode, but if you want to switch it to light mode, you can create conditional styles for that as well. So if I save that and I do a hot reload, you'll see that the text box has changed from having a border on the left and right and the top to just having that border on the bottom. And if we were to run this on an Android device, it would have a completely different style and it would have that full bordered out look. So is this more to your liking, Jan? Does this help you out?
Yeah, it looks good. Now, as you mentioned, this is for iOS users, but we're also looking at making this available for people using Android. Can we make a distinction between the two?
We can make a distinction between the two of Android and iOS? Sure.
Perfect.
Yeah, we can create one up with this sort of platform specific styling here. We can also add to our variables conditional statements for both Android and iOS.
Yeah, so I'm very curious about the multi-platform design. Like, what else can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I'm just going to switch back to the presentation. So there are different approaches to platform design. So one of the approaches that we have is multi-platform design, and this is very much around you having 2 designs for the different platform devices. So you have an iOS design and you have an Android design. So this is probably the more cost-heavy approach, because you have to build up 2 designs, one that heavily follows the Android design principles and one that very heavily follows the iOS design principles. But the benefit with this approach is that you can keep the familiarity that your users have when they're using their devices. And so when they're interacting with it, it's very learnable and they've got a good experience with it because they're very used to it already. And then just the sort of the disadvantage of this approach is that it's very cost heavy effective, and you can't necessarily deliver that unique brand appeal that you want. So your style is very much affected by you trying to keep as much as possible to the guidelines of material design and human interface guidelines by Apple and Android. The second approach we have is a universal design approach. And this is this is a much cheaper method, a much cheaper approach, and it's about trying to design a universal experience that works across both platforms. So you do make compromises on interactions between, so the interactions on your devices, and the experience then can often be deteriorated because you're sort of trying to cut corners and make it so that the experience on both devices is the same. But again, it's a very cost-effective solution, and also you can create that personal brand feel because you're designing for one single design for both platforms. And the final approach is this hybrid approach. And this hybrid approach sort of works very much on that universal approach. So you're creating one design for both platforms, but you also take core components here and there, and you look to style them up in line with the guidelines, along with that multi-platform approach. So, for instance, navigation is one of the cases here. So, if you look on the iOS view on the left-hand side, it's still got the tab view at the bottom with the button bar at the bottom, whereas the Android view doesn't necessarily have that, but it may have a drawer view for navigation. And it's this approach. This approach is a mixture between the two previous ones. This approach is probably average on cost and development costs here and there, but you do need to be careful about sort of balancing out where your design is universal and where you stick to sort of the guidelines that from Apple and Android. You just need to balance that out, because if you go too far, you could lean towards the multi-platform approach, or if you go too far the other way, you can lean towards the universal approach. What approach that you choose is very much up to you and your business needs, as well as your resources available to you.
Excellent. Hey, and Chris, now that we're doing multi-platform and we're making all these changes, what if I'm running the app and something goes wrong? How can we debug a native mobile application?
Yeah, not a problem, Jan. So for debugging, and especially for debugging in Mendix React Native apps, we're going to use sort of two pieces of software, really. So I'm going to use the Mendix native mobile app. I'm also going to use the React Native debugger. So this is a standalone app, not produced by Mendix, but by the React Native community. You can find installation details available on the Mendix docs as well for how you do it. So it's done via Node.js. So it's best to follow the instructions there. But it's basically sort of a command line and inspector like you would see in web development. So what I'm going to do to start it all off, I'm going to turn my native mobile app to developer mode. So I'm going to run it in developer mode. And when you run it in developer mode, you have options to run remote debugging and also run inspector as well. So I'm just going to turn. You've also got this three finger. Now I'm in dev mode. You've got this 3-finger hold control where you can bring up the advanced menu, and you can like turn off in element inspector so I can sign in. You can also turn on the remote debugging as well. So I'm just going to log in quickly to our app. Just log in very quickly, and then you'll see some yellow messages appear now because we're in developer mode and it's a little bit slower to load. I'm going to enable now my remote debugging, and you'll see it connecting up with my debugging screen here. Yeah, so it's connecting up.
So while it's doing that, we have another question for you guys, and that is, what platform are you designing for? So I'm just going to launch that poll right here. Are you working on iOS? Are you doing Android things? Both, maybe? Or you've not actually started any, specific design on any specific platform for any mobile platform. Yeah, very curious to see what we've got on the call. Now, my guess is that most developers do a bit of both, I think. I know at the in the beginning of mobile app development, it was more like, okay, I'm just going to go pure iOS or I'm going to go pure Android. And I feel like there wasn't that much support to easily develop something for both. You'd have to set up separate development tracks. But I think nowadays there are so many tools and so many more standards around that I feel like most people are, doing both and having at least both development tracks ready. So let's have a look at the results of the poll. And the poll and share the results.
Ooh.
Very interesting. So there's only very few people who actually develop specifically for iOS or Android. Most people are involved with both. For the people who say not applicable, I'm also curious. Let us know in the chat. Like, are you developing for something else or a different platform, or are you not working on mobile development at all? Like no design. Curious to hear about that.
So yeah, and I've got the debugger now working for you.
Excellent.
What we can do now with the inspector is that we can sort of inspect elements, and you can see on my computer screen that the inspector is locating the item that I'm clicking. So for instance, if I take this button right here, I can inspect it, see what classes are being applied to it down this little screen down here. And I can also make changes. So I can change, for instance, this the button to red, for instance. And I can also debug if, for instance, that I can see that this button doesn't have rounded corners and you wanted rounded corners on your buttons. And I can see that I've not applied the rounded corners class to this button. So we can, use this debugger and inspector to inspect our native styling, as well as we can take any changes we want that we have made here and copy them across to our styling. So we can sort of make those changes based on what we've debugged. So I think that helps you solve your problem, right, Jan?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is incredible. Now, Chris, if we're going to take it a step further, let's say we're happy with this app and this design. What are your recommendations if we want to apply this to more Mendix app within Siemens? So if we have this branding, and how do we reuse this and redeploy on multiple apps?
Well, and we can go about it in a couple of different ways. So we can help you create up a reusable Atlas package. So we can help you create up a theme package, which will contain all the style sheets that we've been working with. We can also create up a Atlas resource package as well. So that will contain all the custom UI components and widgets that we've created for this project. So what I'm going to start with first is I'm going to start by creating some design properties, and these help you accelerate your app development. So let's say your non-designer developers can sort of make style changes the same way as a designer would make them. So for instance, I'm going to take our button rounded, for instance, and I want to make this into a design property. So if we go back to our theme folder, you'll see two files. So there's a settings.json file. This is very much for our web and desktop applications. And this is that settings file, which defines the design properties. And then we've got our settings-native JSON. And this is what we're going to be using today to sort of create up our native design property for our action button. And in here, you'll see, well, we just located the action button. So this is the default class for all buttons throughout our application. And in there, we can already see that there's a design property already created, and this is for button style, and it's got the type dropdown. So there is sort of two options you have for your design property. So there's dropdown and there's also toggle. So with the drop-down option, you can define a list of options as we have here. So we have primary, secondary, success, warning, danger, inverse, and they are the options that the styles that we can apply to our button. And then if we scroll down here, we've started already to create a sort of a design property for button rounded. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take these comments off and give our design property a name, so button rounded. Then we're going to give it a type. So we're going to give it the type toggle. And toggle is the second option we have available. And toggle just gives you the option of applying this class, yes or no, very simply. So do we want to have a rounded button, yes or no? And you'll see how it's represented in Studio Pro in a minute. And then we're going to give it a description, because we should give all our design properties and then a good description so people know what they're applying. And then finally, the class that's going to be applied to the button. And I'll just take this last one off, and then I save. And then, so a very important part when you're creating design properties is to synchronize your project up. So if I go to project, I want to synchronize my project directory so I can now use that design property. And now if I go back to our home screen and I go to the start button and I go to appearance, we should see a new design property available called button rounded. And I can, as you can see with the toggle option, unlike the drop down option, which is this option, we can toggle yes and no, and it will add the class here to our button. And I can toggle that on and off. And I'll just run that to show that it's working yet.
Excellent. Looks good. Yeah. Now we can see the app reloading as well.
Yeah.
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 All right. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
So the other sort of area that we can add in order for your usability of any patterns you have within Mendix. So I think I've just tried to reload it before it's actually run yet. So we'll just give it a little bit of time for it to sync up. So what else we can do as well is we can also create building blocks for you. And these are useful for when you've got any sort of reusable design patterns that you have throughout your app. And you can then add them to Atlas UI and distribute them as well. So if we go now to our run new edit screen again, and these are representative of our little cards at the top, which have, for instance, have our speed and our distance in it. And you can see that these acquire a reuse pattern here and there. I'm hoping that's going to reload in the background. And what we can do is if we can right click on the container that contains all this, and we can create a building block. And we can call this building block info container, for instance. This is, wait a sec. Just going to reload it. Just going to go and reload it manually. Info container. And you'll see that a new building block appears down here. An important part of any building block is when we create one, we take off all references that we have to our domain model, so that anyone who reuses this building block doesn't have errors as soon as they sort of add it to their page.
Perfect. Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is, okay, this is just loaded up now. Just log in again. I just wanted to show you that design property has been enabled.
Yeah, there was someone asking, hey, are you connected through Wi-Fi, or how does that clone? And this is, so the phone right now is connected through a USB. So it's loading directly from the laptop to the phone.
Yeah. So yeah, as you can see, that design property has been applied, and you can get a rounded corner now on that button. So we'll just finish up now on this building block. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take off the relationship that we had with our domain model, and just put in a simple value here. Just put in a simple value here, so 100. So I now can reuse this building block anywhere I want inside our application. So if I go back to our screen here and I look at building blocks, you'll see that the new building block has been added up here, and I can drag it on the page, and I get no errors when I drag it on the page, and the user can sort of have a look and see what it looks like and feels like very easily as well. What we can also do is we can add this building block to our Atlas resource package. So for instance, we could add it to cards and put it in the native folder there. This resource package then could be exported either and then distributed either via the App Store, or we could either distribute it locally to every member of your development team.
Perfect. Hey, Chris, I'd like to know more about some best practices and things that we have to keep in mind, and love to know if we have any resources that we can share with the community.
Great. So what I want to share with you is just some best practices that I found when I've been working with native mobile. So the first one is to respect the platform. This is very much along the lines of the approach that you're going to take. So along that multi-platform, hybrid, and universal approach, you need to sort of think up front what approach you're going to take. And I'm glad that most of the audience is sort of leaning towards that both iOS and Android approach. So very much leaning towards a hybrid or a universal approach, because the approach that you select really does affect the sort of your development time, how your project's going to run, your user experience as well. If you're going to have that fully native experience for iOS and that fully native experience for Android, that's going to sort of add time to your project. And my second point, and we've sort of seen this in evidence throughout our project, is to work in fast iterations. And with the hot reload as well that we have with Mendix, you can really use that to your advantage, and you can work very quickly because this is all about providing the best mobile experience. And in order to provide the best mobile experience, you need to test early and test often on all mobile devices in order to provide that best experience for all users. And my final point is, the mobile world is a fast-paced world. It's changing all the time. iOS and Android both have conferences once a year, and they introduce new devices and technology at least one a year. They release a new model. So, and as new devices and technologies change, your styling will change. So it comes with great benefit if you stay up to date with the latest and greatest from both Apple and Android. And they're just a few of the points, Jan, I'd like to share. And then finally, those resource links that you would want it. So the first one we have above links out to our React Native textile props. So this is very much to show you what you can and cannot do with styling on different components. Then we have the Mendix docs, which shows you what you can and can't do with Mendix native widgets that we've created custom for Mendix development. And then we have, there's a document on Flexbox. So Flexbox is also a very important distinction between web and native mobile, in that Flexbox is used throughout native mobile, and it's the standard and it's used default. So there's a good resource on there. And then finally, I'm just going to share with you the resource on how to native debug, because I'm assuming a lot of people will want to know and either have native mobile apps in production or in development, and they want to know how to debug their styling as well.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much. This brings us to the Q&A. So we already have a lot of questions in the Q&A window. And while we're doing the Q&A, I'm just going to run the last poll. And that's, how do you want to learn more about native mobile design? Yeah. So let us know what you think and what the best way is we can help you out. Now, yeah, I think we can continue to the Q&A slide and start with some questions. So,
sorry, Jan, do you want to plug Mendix World?
Oh yeah, of course. Actually, one of the resources, in case you want to learn more and you want to join more sessions on this, Mendix World is coming up, guys, and we have a lot of sessions on mobile, native mobile design, and how to approach the strategy for that. Plus, we'll have an actual live AMA session with Danny Roost, who's the product manager for mobile at Mendix. So make sure you join that session. It's a 30-minute session on September 1st. So go to mendixworld.com and sign up for that. We also have another live webinar, just like this, on September 3rd, and which will be building a speech to, voice to text, a chatbot application. So make sure you join Mendix World, guys. Obviously, you know, if you're doing anything with Mendix, Mendix World is a place to be. Now that we've plugged all the sessions, there's no more reason to to not sign up. Yeah, let's see how many questions we can go through in a short time. So we've got about 8 minutes left. Let's see if we could do some rapid fire answers. So the first one, does hot reload involve Calypso?
So for native mobile, it doesn't. So I'm not running Calypso, but if you want to do hot reload on the web, you need to run Calypso.
Right.
That's for web development. Sorry. Yeah, get that in there.
Right, yeah. Is there a best practice or a recommended approach for Mendix native app and Azure Active Directory authentication? Oof. So this is more of a user-related issue.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'm assuming there's an Azure module in the App Store where there will be someone who is detailed on Azure. I'm afraid I'm not the expert on Azure integration with native mobile, but I'm sure in Danny's session, the AMA session, I'm sure he'll be happy enough to answer that question and point you in the right direction.
Perfect. Yeah. Any questions you don't get answered here, you can obviously join us on Slack and ask the community about this, or join the AMA session at Mendix World and ask the actual product manager himself. Next question, do we need to use container within every React Native class?
No, so that's just the structure of the widgets that I was working on. So a lot of them don't use container, and a lot of them, for instance, the text one will just use text, for instance. So and then other ones will just use, but container is just used in some spaces. It's the matter of what widget you're going to use and that structure, and you can find out that structure on the Mendix docs. So you can find out there's code snippets on there where you can view and see the structure of any widget that you want to use in Mendix on native mobile.
Perfect. So we shared some resources already, but do you think there will be a learning path to design native mobile apps?
Yeah, I believe one is in the planning. I think it's an area where we want you to do more of it. So we want to encourage more of it. And as I know, we have a UX chapter within Mendix, and it's one of the key objectives in our team. And it's something that we're looking to do at some point this year, a native mobile sort of learning path, because we want you guys to build the best native mobile apps you can. And we want to help you in any way.
Excellent. How do you cater for dark mode or light mode? I think we briefly touched on it.
I didn't show you the expression, but it's very much on the same route as the platform expression. So let me just, if I can just go to Visual Studio for a minute, I had it set up. So if you can see this comment at the top here, so this is the function that runs on dark mode. So this will detect if dark mode is inactive. And then you can write a conditional statement, which I believe I've got one here somewhere. So this is the dark mode statement. And then, here we go. So this will change the background color depending on dark mode. So you use the question mark to do the if statement, for instance, if you're writing in code, for instance, and this will detect if what mode the phone's running in and then apply the applicable background color.
Excellent. Can we add values to validation message? Bracket, bracket. So it's from Tim. Maybe you can check the question in the Q&A.
Is this? I'm assuming this is around the measures that get displayed back to user, and you can set that on, for instance, on the text box. So on the text box, you can set the validation message. At the moment, I haven't set any validation, but you can set up, for instance, custom, and you can set up the validation message that comes with that. So you can set custom here, and then you can type in any message that you want to display and use variables as well.
All right. Let's see. What is the, so a simple question actually, what is the app that call that you're using for your code?
Visual Studio Code. I've only really moved. I was using brackets before, but Visual Studio Code has a great number of extensions, and it has this great dark mode. I think everyone's crazy about dark mode at the moment, and I'm no different. And it's got this great folder structure here, so you can upload your folder. So instead of open up individual sheets, you can work with inside your folder of your project, and you also can install as many extensions as you want. So it has an app store available where there's a whole list of extensions out there, as well as you can, it's great as well. If you get into custom widget development, Visual Studio Code is a great tool for that as well.
Awesome. I'm just going to continue. I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I think it's important to get to as many questions as we can. How do we do with localization? So I18N, I10N.
Localization.
So different text strings and.
So we handle that in Mendix. So we handle that with our language translations, with our time. So every project in Mendix will have a settings at the top here where you can. So we'll have languages, and in languages, you can put down your localization stuff. So I've set, so default in Mendix, everything comes in United States. But if I wanted to add United Kingdom, or if I wanted to add Jan's glorious land of the Netherlands, I could put in the date format, the time format, and then a date format that they want to work with. I can also put in their country code as well. And then also within Mendix as well, we have a language control. So I can, any controls on the page, any labels or text descriptions, I can set up language descriptions for each of those. It's an important step, especially in accessibility or anything like that. And I know we have a number of docs in our Mendix document on how to cope with localization.
Yep, that's right. Let's see. Can we have a side menu, just like the web application, like a side panel when you click on your profile on LinkedIn, for example?
I think you would have to, so I know you can have a bottom menu now, a bottom sheet. You'd have to check with Danny on that AMN meeting, where I know there's one in the pipeline on having a drawer, and check where that is in development, to be honest. I know it is. I know we want to have that option available, have like a hamburger menu available, as well as the bottom bar, because I know it's an important thing for Android. I know Android, a lot of their navigation menus are hamburgers in that drawer. So it is something I know we're looking to do, but you'd have to check with Danny on where that is in the development cycle.
Right. So a good question here from Ronald, one of our MVP, is what is the best way to keep Atlas in sync when there's a new Atlas release, for example?
So the best way to do that is those two folders that we looked at. So you've got app and core. The best way to do that is to not to change too much of the core, because when we upgrade Atlas, that core, so this folder in Visual Studio, this folder here is what we look to upgrade in Atlas. So always, write your custom code, any custom code you want. Keep it very much confined to the app folder up the top here, because if you start writing in core, and then when you upgrade your Atlas version and you realize it's all been overwritten, we can't do too much to help you out there. So just try and keep it all in the app section for custom code. And the same could be said of building blocks, because when you upgrade your Atlas resource package, that will overwrite any building blocks you've created. So try and keep your custom building blocks separate from the Atlas ones.
Right. Question here, can the Mendix React Native app be invoked by third-party applications using intents?
Oh, that's again, that's another question. I think you should say for Mr. Danny. I think he would enjoy that question.
That's more of an architectural question, I guess. Yeah. Let's see. So I'm just going to do 3 more questions. So just so I want to respect everyone's time. Let's see. Is there any need for having Android Studio installed or Logcat, for example?
So the React Native app that we have on our mobile can work on Android. If you want to sort of run it in emulator, so I also have Xcode running on my machine to run the native mobile apps in Xcode. It's really just a preference, and I really think it's just a sort of a personal choice if you want to run it in an emulator or on your mobile device. I know most of us at Mendix both have both an iOS device and an Android device in order to do this cross-testing. But if you don't have that luxury, you can use Android Studio to sort of test in Android, as well as Xcode if you just have an Android device. So it's very much, if you want to test on both devices and you don't have physical devices, you can use an emulator.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to say last question because we really have to round up. The last question is, can we use or import third-party libraries like custom widgets, font icons, animations, et cetera, within Mendix React Native? And
yeah,
maybe follow up on that is, what are the restrictions on that?
I'm not sure on the restrictions, but I know some of my colleagues who do a lot of custom native widgets would be able to help you out in that way. So I don't know if we can release people's names, but I know Eric Taniba, for instance, he would be a great resource on that to answer any questions. I don't believe there is that many restrictions on creating your own sort of native mobile widgets. I think you just have to invest the time in learning how to do it yourself.
Right. Excellent. Yeah, and with that, we come to the end. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. The last thing I want to share here are the results of the last poll. So how do you want to learn more about native mobile design? This is really helpful for us to figure out what is the best content to create for you guys, and yeah, to help you build better native mobile apps. Thank you for joining today. Make sure you sign up for Mendix World for more content, more videos, and more hands-on sessions on native mobile and much, much more. Right, signing off. See you next time.